The very night my life crashed, the television was busy congratulating everyone but me. A smiling anchor stood right in front of a glowing market chart, calling it the greatest 15-year bull run in history. Stocks soared, real estate exploded, and random startups had somehow become huge household names. She kept saying normal people had completely changed their lives just by getting in early and staying patient. Meanwhile, I was sitting on the floor of my parents' tiny apartment, with soggy instant noodles cold beside me. 3 empty beer cans leaned sadly against my desk. My monitor was still showing the victory layout of a game I spent all night mindlessly grinding. In that game, I had resources, timing, and a plan, but in real life, I had absolutely nothing. I was Haruto Sato. I was 35 years old, unemployed, single, and still rotting in the exact room I swore I would leave before 20. The television host smiled, talking about how early players were calling this the easiest wealth cycle of their entire lives. That easiest wealth cycle, that phrase cut deeper than any insult because I actually remembered all the signs. Not as useful knowledge. Not back then. Back then, every single warning and opportunity just looked like annoying background noise. That rundown warehouse district people mocked for bad trains later turned into a high-end luxury zone. A tiny payment startup everyone called overvalued? It became a daily necessity. The remote work tool people mocked suddenly became completely necessary. We all know how a massive crash scares people into selling early, and I just watched it happen from this room. The world was handing out clear signals for 15 years, while I had been busy chasing fake levels on imaginary characters because real life already felt way too late. Behind my closed door, my mother coughed softly in the kitchen. My dad turned down the living room TV, probably worried the loud noise might bother me. That quietness hurt way more than shouting. They didn't even yell anymore, they passed that stage years ago. Disappointment gets pretty quiet when people run completely out of hope. Staring at my reflection in the dark window, I saw a pale face, tired eyes, slumped shoulders. I had become the exact kind of loser I hated looking at. If I had only known. I whispered to myself, just once, if I had started early enough. And right then the room shifted. My game monitor suddenly flickered, and the television audio dropped into a quiet hum. A glowing blue-white panel suddenly popped up right in front of my face, making me kick over 2 beer cans as I stumbled backward. This thing didn't look like any normal website, and it definitely wasn't a standard video game menu. It just floated there, completely silent and clean, almost as if reality itself had loaded up a menu option. System message: do you wish to be reborn? Yes or no? Seriously, put yourself in my shoes. I stood there completely frozen, thinking my brain had finally snapped. But my second thought was way worse. What if I hadn't? The clean interface floated right above my stale noodles, empty cans, and the market chart that had just judged my existence. No angel explained it, no warning popped up. There was no grand promise that came with it either, just one simple choice, yes or no. For once, tomorrow wasn't forcing me to just endure. Instead, yesterday was asking if I wanted to steal my life back. But before I even answered, I understood exactly why this system had appeared in my bedroom. My life had become a sad routine of pure avoidance. I knew the tiny sounds of my parents' apartment way better than any normal office. My mother's slippers shuffling in the hallway, my father's keys jingling by the door. That brief pause before one of them almost knocked on my door, and the long silence after they walked away. They weren't cruel people, which only made it way harder. Mean parents would have given me an enemy to blame. They gave me warm meals, quiet concern, and this painful patience that made my failure feel heavier every single year. But I had not always been hopeless. I was once average. Average grades, normal dreams, and this quiet belief that my real life would just start eventually, because that is what adults promised. Then, one exam went wrong, one part-time job ended badly. One interview became 3, then 10, then 0. My world did not collapse. It just stopped inviting me forward. Video games were easier because they actually gave you the rules before punishing you. Grinding actually paid off. You could fail, restart, farm resources, learn boss patterns, and just wait for the perfect opening. Real life only sent bills, so I got pretty good at things nobody actually respected. I could study an in-game economy for 12 hours straight to predict a rare item price spike. I hoarded weeks of resources until other players panicked and sold everything cheap. I memorized brutal boss patterns until an impossible nightmare fight became absolute routine. I knew how to wait, I understood systems, and I knew exactly when to strike while others were panic selling. But I wasted all that genius on digital worlds that vanished the second a server shut down. In the real world, I dodged bank apps, relatives, old classmates, and mirrors. First I told myself I was tired, then I blamed bad luck. Eventually, I just stopped making excuses. But regret has a way of lingering. I did not memorize exact stock charts. I did not hold secret business formulas. I was never some professional investment genius, but I remembered the general trends because each missed chance cut me deep. Cheap areas that suddenly boomed. The mocked online platform that became massive. The market panics that were actually golden opportunities. That painful line printed in every single news article, anyone who bought in early made a total fortune. That was the part I could never forgive. I was actually alive. I was awake enough to see it happening, but I was just too ashamed, too terrified, and too used to losing to take action. My father used to say that talent without action just rots away. I hated him for saying it. Then, I proved him completely right. Seriously, think about it. When that screen offered a second chance, my answer was already decided. It had been building up for 15 long years. Maybe it was just a hallucination. Maybe it was a trap, or maybe I was just a loser desperately reaching for a cheat code. A miserable life like mine does not end with some massive, dramatic climax. It dies in thousands of silent mornings where you promise to change but never do. I stared at the thin wooden door where my parents slept right on the other side. Looking back at the system panel, the cursor lingered on no. My hand pushed yes. I expected thunder, pain, or some flash of light to make my choice feel grand. Nothing happened. The screen vanished. The television static returned. My sad room was unchanged. I was still Haruto Sato, 35 years old, surrounded by cold noodles and trash. For 1 second, shame burned hotter than hope. Figures. Even a miracle would look at me and change its mind. I just crawled back to bed. Before sleeping, the last thing I saw was the stock chart climbing on TV, climbing like it had somewhere better to be. Unbelievable, my rebirth felt exactly like failure until bright morning light woke me up. Not the depressing gray light that usually crept through my old, dusty curtains. This was pristine morning light, bright enough to sting. Plus, the room smelled totally different. It was less stale, with no scent of old dust, cheap beer, or a locked bedroom door. My immediate thought was that my mother cleaned up while I was sleeping. Then it hit me, my body felt completely off. This futon felt way too close to the floor. My skin was incredibly smooth, even my breathing felt strangely light. Sitting up didn't hurt my back, my stomach didn't fold over, and my knees didn't creak at all. It felt like someone had finally lifted a massive weight off my bones. I rushed over to the closet mirror. A 19-year-old kid stared back, lean, clear-skinned, with incredibly sharp eyes. Honestly, I would have hated this face in my past life. It looked like doors opened for him before he even knocked. I brushed my cheek. The kid in the glass did the same. Suddenly, a flood of broken memories crashed into my mind. Ren Takahashi, 19 years old, a college student. Works part-time at a convenience store, living with his mom and little sister. My legs almost buckled. I wasn't Haruto Sato anymore. Well, at least not to the rest of the world. Suddenly, the phone on the desk buzzed. I snatched it up so fast I nearly dropped it. Look closely, the screen says 16 years in the past. This isn't some fantasy world or a magical dungeon. It is the exact same country, same economy, and same market cycle. That crazy blue screen didn't send me to heaven, it threw me right back to the start of the charts. Just then, the bedroom door slid open. A young girl in a school uniform stood there holding a towel. Her gaze was pretty narrow, sharp, and highly suspicious. She asks why I am staring at myself like a weirdo. My throat completely locks up. It is Yui, my new little sister. Her name pops into my head with total certainty, but it definitely doesn't bring any comfort. It just brings raw pressure. She is real, expecting her actual brother. Instead, her brother has been standing frozen in front of a mirror like some total stranger. I force a fake smile and tell her I just slept bad. Yui doesn't push it. She throws the towel my way and says breakfast is nearly on the table. That was my very first lesson in this new life. Miracles don't give you any time to stand around amazed. They give you a role and punish you if you fail. Sitting at the kitchen table, our mother quickly apologizes for the cheap breakfast before anyone can complain. She smiles too quickly. It is the look of someone desperately trying to calculate bills in her head. Then, I notice the envelopes by the rice cooker. Unpaid rent, late fees, and a final warning slipped under a cracked magnet. This family is clearly on the verge of losing their home. The fantasy of being young and hot lasted less than an hour. See for yourself, here are the 3 facts I confirmed. The year is totally real, and the housing market hasn't crashed yet. If I don't move fast, the very first people I fail in this timeline will be my own family. I just stand in the hallway, holding that eviction notice with my new name on it. Ren Takahashi. A fresh life, a new face, and 0 cash. Along with 16 years of future memories burning in my head like a map made of smoke. But I don't run out to buy anything. That would be incredibly stupid. Some naive kid with a pretty face might think the world owes him. But Haruto Sato knows much better. The world loves destroying people who jump in blind, so I check. I spend the entire morning on this old laptop, comparing what I remember with the actual present. Checking headlines, forum posts, local property prices, and company names. All this tech chatter looks completely meaningless to normal people, but it makes my hands go cold. I don't need exact numbers anyway. It is not like I actually memorized those. My memory was not some grand prophecy. It was just a giant pile of regrets. A dead warehouse district, and a payment company whose early users behaved like actual cult members. A founder mocked for an idea that later becomes completely normal. A brief, 3-day panic that shook retail traders. A forgotten online event that future investors would absolutely cry over missing out on. Slowly but surely, every single piece of that smoke map started matching the real world around me. Not perfectly, but close enough. Honestly, that was way scarier than complete chaos. If this future was identical to the one I remembered, then I held real power. No cheat sword, no magic, no video game screen. Just something much cleaner and deadlier. But here is the catch: Ren had absolutely zero seed money, loose change and a half-empty bus card, along with a miserable convenience store shift that paid just enough to feel insulting. The rent was due right now, not after some legendary rise, so I worked, constantly bowing to customers. Stocking drinks, cleaning floors, smiling at wasted office guys who called me a pretty boy and told me to enjoy my youth. Every single penny went straight into savings. My boss even glared when I skipped buying a post-shift snack. A coworker asked if I was saving for a date, but I was saving for an opening. That got a good laugh. But at night, Yui caught me staring at endless receipts. I had 3 browser tabs open to a sketchy trading platform no real investor would ever trust. She quietly asked when I had started obsessing over cash, replying too fast. I said people need to care before it becomes an actual emergency. Her expression shifted by one very careful degree. The old Ren Takahashi would have complained or just laughed it off. Instead, I sounded like someone who had already suffered the consequences. Yui did not press further. Honestly, that was worse. Smart people save their questions until you cannot escape. The event I recalled was just a minor, short-term trading competition with a new partner. Most dismissed it as a cheap gimmick. But a massive pricing error, a traffic spike, and one buyout rumor would turn small change into a life-changing payout. In my past life, I had completely ignored a post about it while eating cheap noodles. Someone wrote that even a simple convenience store paycheck could make you rich if you were early. But guess what this time? I was that very paycheck. The night before launch, I stared at that deposit button until my eyes literally burned. It was barely anything. I used to waste way more on video games back then. Right now, it was our entire life savings. A sudden blue light flickered at the edge of my eye. System message. Deviation rate 0.1%, then it vanished, but the panel stayed. It was waiting. I probably should have paused and asked what those numbers actually meant. But the eviction notice sat on our table, and my mom was already skipping meals to save food. So I hit the button. To everyone else, I was just a broke 19-year-old gambling with his pocket change. But I saw the very first tear in history. Then, for 2 days, absolutely nothing happened. Pure agony. Waiting in video games feels strategic because stats keep ticking up on screen. In real life, waiting just feels like being incredibly stupid in slow motion. The market budged slightly, then froze. Forums completely roasted the entire event. One user posted that only total idiots and desperate students would touch it. Just another joke about some pretty boy with lunch money getting schooled by real investors. But I did not say a word. Answering was for people who needed witnesses before showing results. But inside, my heart was racing. My memory had never been tested like this before. I only remembered this event as a future punchline, not as a clean financial chart. What if the rumor started on a different day? What if the platform changed its rules? What if I already ruined the future? But look at this: on the 3rd morning, the alert hits. User volume suddenly spiked. Then, a massive partnership rumor hit. A major payment giant confirmed a technical integration that the internet forum had dismissed as completely impossible. My account balance finally shifted. Like a heavy door unlocking. By afternoon, my tiny paycheck had grown enough to cover our overdue rent, late fees, and 2 solid months of breathing room. I sat there in the convenience store stockroom, staring at the balance while the buzzing fluorescent lights hummed above me. I had been completely right, and for once, being right actually changed something real in this life. That evening, I slid the transfer confirmation in front of Ren's mother before she could apologize for our dinner again. She stared down at the paper, then up at me, and then back at the paper. She softly asked where it came from. I gave her the simplest, safest answer. Just a lucky online trade, nothing major. I had been very careful. It was not entirely a lie. Ren's mother just cried quietly. They were not dramatic tears, but the exhausted kind that fall when you have been holding everything together alone and one heavy burden finally lifts. That really should have been enough for me. It was definitely enough for her. It was enough to save our apartment. But shame is greedy. After years of feeling utterly worthless, one single victory did not make me humble. It made me hungry instead. The forum changed the very next morning. And here is the best part, those toxic commenters immediately started making excuses, calling it pure luck. Others even claimed they had seen it coming all along. One user even posted a screenshot of my old comment, the one where I called out the mispricing. Replies shifted. Not to respect, but to suspicion. Who is this guy, and how did he know? Pretty boy got lucky, they said. Still, the laughter was different. It had a sharp edge now. Yui cornered me near the balcony that night. She did not even ask about the money first. Instead, she asked why I had used that phrase. People panic the same way in every single cycle. I had not even noticed saying it. A 19-year-old brother should never have sounded like someone who had watched decades of fear repeat itself. I told her I had just read too many finance blogs, but she did not believe me. Instead, she told me you saved us, so I am thankful, but you looked happy before Mom did. That exact sentence stayed with me because she was entirely right. I was relieved the apartment was safe, but before any sense of kindness, before gratitude, before family, I had simply felt the thrilling rush of winning. Later, when the apartment finally went quiet, a familiar blue-white shimmer returned near my hand. System alert timeline deviation increased 1.3%. Memory may fluctuate. The words vanished before I could touch them. Cold fear rose in my stomach. Then I looked at the paid rent receipt on the table. For a man who wasted his first life watching others succeed, fear was nothing compared to solid proof. I had saved our home, and the world had laughed just a little less. After saving the apartment, I swore to myself I would move carefully. I lasted 9 days. The problem with having a map of the future is that every single street starts looking like a test of your courage. A cheap district nobody respects yet. Some broke founder begging for early signups. That trendy stock I only remembered as a massive future scandal. A minor panic destined to scare retail investors into selling right before the rebound. I did not know every detail, but I knew enough to spot the waves before others even noticed them. So I played it safe, selling before a crash and buying back once the panic fully peaked. I explored that ugly warehouse district long before any redevelopment rumors even started. I funded a tiny software startup because of a founder interview everyone else laughed off. I stayed away from one famous stock. My memory of it was just a bad headline and a sinking feeling. Every single move was totally unique. Repeat the same trick once, and people just call it lucky. But when you cross-play markets, districts, and rumors, luck gets left completely behind. Online forums noticed first calling me the student investor, a pretty boy gambler, or just a lucky brat. Then, a user posted a list of 5 strange moves, 5 perfect entries, 4 clean exits, and 1 avoided disaster. The thread title was hilarious. The calendar prince arrives before the boom. That nickname spread way faster than actual facts. Initially, I hated it, but soon I was checking that thread over and over. The calendar prince, a ridiculous, highly public name, a title that certainly did not belong to Haruto Sato, the man nobody ever waited for. It was Ren Takahashi. This handsome nobody who always arrived too early and left way too cleanly. Fame is incredibly dangerous when you have starved in secret. It feels like justice, even if it is just noise. Soon, things went offline. An agent called because I walked through some empty district, asking if I represented a major buyer. That broke startup founder messaged me, begging me to review his business pitch. A trader offered dinner if I shared my trading calendar. 2 scammers tried to sell me insider tips I already knew better than they did. Then the copycats arrived. Young investors started blindly copying my public moves without understanding my actual reasons. Some bought way too late, others sold way too early. They treated my silence as a signal, and my mistakes as a conspiracy. For the first time, my influence felt incredibly heavy. Not enough to stop me, but enough to alarm Yui. She discovered those district maps in my room and demanded to know why realtors were calling our house. I told her I was simply building options. She said I sounded like some lonely middle-aged man pretending everything was fine. That really stung. I snapped back that my money saved this apartment. Yui did not flinch, replying that yes, money saved us, but it did not explain why her brother smiled whenever strangers panicked about missing out. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I remembered those cold noodles, the empty beer cans, and that market chart climbing higher without me. I love being early watching desperate people chase after a door I had already walked right through. But look at this, someone was already compiling a list. I did not know it yet, but inside Moro Capital, an analyst flagged my trades as statistically abnormal. Nothing illegal, not big enough to threat markets, but way too consistent across random sectors. Arriving too early to climb, the report climbed up the ladder. By the time I bought a stake in that supposedly dead warehouse district, Director Yumi Kuroda had already read my name. She circled one phrase in that report, calendar prints. She placed a silver coin right next to the paper, smiling like she had discovered a gold mine before anyone else knew it existed. Yumi Kuroda didn't treat me like an enemy at first. That made her way deadlier. She showed up right after my meeting with this anxious founder, whose project sounded totally brainless unless you knew what office spaces would look like 10 years down the road. The black car stopped near the curb. A woman in a light coat stared from the back seat, already knowing my name before I could even speak. Not just Ren Takahashi, the student investor, the calendar prince. Somehow, her voice turned that viral nickname from a silly internet meme into a cold, classified file label. Director Yumi Kuroda of Moro Capital was razor-sharp, like a highly polished knife, calm, efficient, and designed to cut deep without showing any emotion at all. A silver coin kept rolling across her fingers while she spoke. According to her, Moro respected unusual timing. She said raw young talent needed protection. Public spotlight only brings out thieves, regulators, predators, and idiots, she warned. But Moro offered structure, real access, legitimacy, and doors that would never open for some ordinary kid with zero elite connections and no real history. Everything she offered was something Haruto Sato had desperately wanted. A room where powerful people actually listened. That system called me valuable before I had to beg, a real shot at not being treated like some mistake. Then Kuroda dropped the one phrase that turned the air freezing cold: history belongs to the first buyer. I looked closely at the coin. One side was totally blank. The other had a thin engraved line, resembling a timeline split wide open by a blade. Kuroda watched my face and smiled. She didn't ask how I knew the future. She only asked if I truly understood the heavy cost of arriving early. That was the test, though. Most people would have only heard some simple metaphor. I heard ownership. She gave me 3 distinct opportunities during that short talk. One was genuine, one was already dead, and one would become legendary but only years from now. She wanted to see which future would make me flinch, but I gave her absolutely nothing obvious. But hiding secrets from Kuroda wasn't like dodging keyboard warriors on some forum. She didn't need proof, she just wanted enough weird clues to justify taking full control. Late that night, the glowing blue-white panel returned over the dark window. System alert deviation, 7.8%. Detected returner activity, returner. That single word sank way deeper than any stock market crash. I wasn't the only one. Suddenly, a second notification flickered. Timeline market synchronization unstable. Then, the glowing letters blurred. For just 1 second, I smelled stale beer and cheap noodles, like my old rundown room had materialized inside Ren's body. When the vision cleared, one critical memory was gone, a major company name. I knew it was mass attention. I knew attention, but whenever I reached for it, the name completely dissolved. Right then, I finally got it. The system panel wasn't showing me mercy. It was access, and access always has rules. Later, Yui found me staring blankly at my own reflection again. This time, I didn't look like some young kid to myself. I looked like a grown man wearing a young face he hadn't actually earned. She asked what Mara wanted. When I told her they wanted to invest, Yui scoffed, saying people like that don't invest in young boys. They invest in control. I should have been annoyed, but instead, I felt incredibly relieved. At least someone else in this timeline could spot a trap without needing some glowing screen to label it. The very next morning, Kuroda sent over a package. Inside was just another silver coin with no note. She didn't need one. Moro Capital didn't want to stop the calendar prince. They wanted to buy him up before history realized his true worth. Sadly, the first memory that betrayed me was the one I trusted the most. It all started with a mid-sized shipping company connected to the warehouse docks I'd been keeping tabs on. Back in my first life, that exact company was a running joke for years. But then, a massive rezoning project and a tech deal launched its stock so high, internet forums treated it like a myth. I remembered the whole timeline perfectly. The district boom, the stock spike, early buyers get rich. It wasn't an absolute guarantee, but it was supposed to be a safe bet. I told my small group of followers to hold steady during the initial market dip. I dumped my own cash in and dropped some public hints, since the calendar prince hype was already rolling. I knew it was reckless, but I loved it. People hung on my every word, making me feel unstoppable. But wait until you see how quickly things shattered. The partnership went public too early, and with the wrong firm. Suddenly, a regulatory hammer dropped. Worse, a massive more-linked fund stepped in, manipulation heavy, warping the price chart into something I'd never witnessed. The minor dip became a crater. Everyone who bought in late was suddenly losing their shirts. No rich traders, just broke students. Struggling office workers who viewed my tips as their golden ticket out of the rat race. One guy messaged me before vanishing completely. He'd bet his rent cash because the calendar prince was never wrong. I stared at that screen until my vision blurred. Suddenly, my small room felt suffocating. I didn't tell him to risk his life savings. That was the first excuse I clung to. But Yui's voice cut through my thoughts before she even stepped inside. She crossed her arms in the doorway, stating, "You'll just say they chose this." She wasn't yelling at me. Even worse. It was that silent, disappointed anger I remembered from my past life. I argued that the market had glitched. I told her Moro Capital had stepped in. The pattern should have worked. She just listened. Then she said, "You keep saying pattern when you actually mean real people." That completely silenced me because this wasn't about math. She was calling out how incredibly detached I was becoming from the world. To me, that shipping firm was just a digital node. The district? Prime luxury real estate. The panic? Just a mechanic. My online followers were just background noise around the main signal, but that tenant's rent was incredibly real. The fear was real, the deleted account, real. And Yui was staring at me, searching for her brother behind my cold eyes. Then, the system glitched open. System alert timeline deviation 22.4%. Memory reliability degraded. A rush of memories hit me, then crumbled into pieces. The brand logos turned into blank squares, and one town name split into 3 possibilities. A major crash I recalled perfectly suddenly split across different dates. Yet, my cheat wasn't gone. That uncertainty was worse. And guess who decided to call me that evening? Kuroda. She didn't sound happy at all. She sounded fully prepared. She warned me that public backlash is lethal for solo players, whereas Maro has compliance networks, armies of PR experts, analysts, and endless cash to absorb any disaster. I didn't have to carry this heavy load on my own. It was corporate control disguised as salvation. And for one tiny split second, I actually wanted it. To let someone else take the fall. Let them calculate the numbers. Let them handle making the future predictable again. As Yui turned to walk away, I softly asked if she despised me. She stopped right in the hallway, whispering that she did not even recognize me anymore. That cut deeper than any failed trade. By morning, the online forums completely turned on me. While some tried defending me, others mocked me, claiming Calendar Prince was exposed. They said I was just pulling everyone's strings. The online name I secretly loved became a weapon. For the first time since being reborn, I realized that popularity is not the same as being understood. I just wanted people to value me. But instead, I only taught them to bet on my shadow. I ignored Kuroda for 3 whole days. That was not strength, it was pure survival. All my past instincts told me to run close the laptop and hide. To just let the storm pass, pretending the victims were merely numbers on some screen. But this time, someone was watching. My sister Yui still made breakfast. She still headed to school, calmly reassuring Ren's mother whenever she asked if something was wrong. But she stopped talking to me. Her silence was not peace, it was a completely locked door. So, I changed the only thing I controlled. No more treating the future like a cheat code. It needed to be a compass. Just a direction, not a flat answer. I rebuilt my process from scratch. Every memory required real proof. Each single trade needed a solid reason, even if my old future was completely gone. My public moves needed a safety net for those naive enough to copy me. That rule hurt because it meant accepting those followers were real people, not just background noise. Even after I explained, Yui did not forgive me. She demanded to know how I would help the victims. I wanted to tell her I could not save everyone, but those cold excuses tasted like Moro. I had to start smaller. Under my Calendar Prince alias, I posted a warning, begging followers not to trade with rent or debt money. I started closing my own positions publicly. Then, I helped coordinate information for people caught in the shipping panic, not as some genius prophet, but as the guy who made the danger worse by becoming their symbol. Some called it cowardice. Others said it was too late. They were not totally wrong, but a few listened. It was a messy, real start. Then, Yui gave me my first real clue. She quietly tossed a local newspaper clipping on my desk about complaints near the warehouse district. Angry tenant groups and delivery drivers. Small businesses were pressured way before the rezoning became official. I had only watched real estate values. But Yui was watching the actual people. This changed everything. That neighborhood was not growing naturally. A shadow player was creating distress, buying up land through shell companies, and using panic to speed up the timeline. It was Morrow or someone copying their brutal playbook. Suddenly, all the other pieces aligned. That logistics memory had not simply drifted, it had been bent on purpose. Morrow was not just predicting market crashes, they were actually creating them, then buying up the cheap assets. That was when my past life parents returned to my world. Not physically, they had no idea who I was. In this timeline, Haruto Sato was still young, somewhere out there, slowly turning into the desperate man I used to be. My real parents were alive, working, completely unaware that a stranger named Ren Takahashi was searching their names at 3 in the morning with shaking hands. And Morrow's next market strike was going to hit ordinary families just like them. Desperate folks with zero savings were pushed to start a panic. I couldn't just walk into their home and explain I was their son from a completely ruined future. So, I protected them the only way I knew how, completely in secret. I quietly funneled opportunities through a local program and tweaked a public warning right where they would see it, stabilizing a neighborhood fund connected to their home without ever letting my real name touch theirs. It wasn't dramatic at all. This didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like unconditional, quiet love. By the weekend, Yui was standing right by my desk for the first time since our total failure. She pointed to 3 linked companies, and get this. If Morrow was creating the panic, then their actual target wasn't just a single district. They wanted a massive, controlled market crash. An economic collapse big enough to buy cheap assets and silence all their rivals, proving that history is written by whoever strikes first. I stared down at Kuroda's silver coin sitting on my desk, and for once, I didn't feel even slightly tempted by its power. Instead, I just felt dangerously late, and falling behind right now wasn't an option. Kuroda agreed to meet me on the penthouse floor of a skyscraper completely missing from Morrow's official website. That's exactly how the ultra-rich hide, not in dark alleys, but in luxury penthouses so expensive, nobody dares to question them. The city stretched below the glass, showing slums I knew were cheap, and skyscrapers that shouldn't exist for years, full of ordinary people who had absolutely no clue that a group of wealthy suits upstairs was about to turn their terror into profit. Slowly, Kuroda set the silver coin on the table right between us. She casually mentioned I'd done decent work for a total amateur. That was her first real insult. Then, she claimed I'd officially hit the ceiling of what solo talent can achieve. And there was the pitch. Morrow had targeted the exact same instability I had. They called it a market, but you and I know it wasn't trading stocks. They traded in pure leverage, regret, and second chances. Time-traveling returners like me weren't holy miracles. We were just instruments showing which timeline changes produced the biggest profits. Many burned out, some completely lost their minds, and others were bought off early to live in comfort. Kuroda said comfortably, as if it were mercy. Next, she laid out the crash plan, not directly, since elites like her never hand over incriminating evidence. She showed me enough shell companies, pressure points, and engineered rumors, liquidity traps, struggling slums, and pre-written public lies completely primed to launch. Morrow would trigger the panic, then play savior to the market they wounded. Corrupt politicians would call it stability, the media would spin it as a correction, while regular folks would remember it as the day they lost everything. And she wanted me in. She said my memory was failing because I was fighting this massive system all alone. Morrow could stabilize my access, give me clearer visions, and protect Yui and Ren's mother. Then she softly added they could also protect the birth parents I'd been trying so hard to hide. My blood went cold. She didn't know everything, but easily enough. The old Haruto inside me desperately wanted to take her lucrative deal. True wealth, elite status, absolute safety, and a seat at the table where nobody could ever mock me again. It was everything I wanted in that dark room. Then my phone buzzed. A single text from Umi, no complex strategy, just a simple reminder. People aren't outcomes. I stared at those words until the city below stopped looking like some chart. Kuroda noticed my sudden hesitation and smirked, assuming she understood my silence, and that I was calculating my price. I was remembering a cheap rent receipt and a deleted text from a follower. I still hear my mother coughing behind a closed door in my first life. My real parents are alive and completely clueless, while Umi stares like I traded myself for this apartment. Flashes on the glass. Deviation 46%. Critical error. Warning: changing this timeline will wipe my memories. Here is the brutal bill. If I crush Morrow now, the future I remember breaks forever. The map that made me special? Gone. Hiroda slides a coin my way, claiming history rewards bold buyers, not sentimental fools. I pick up the coin. For 1 second, she looks victorious. But I balance it on its edge and flick it right back. I tell her she is dead wrong. History does not belong to the first buyer. It belongs to the people forced to survive the purchase. And my move begins right now. Umi already leaked tenant data to hungry reporters who actually care about the truth. The startup founder I backed early on uses his massive platform to blow the whistle. My loyal followers, warned during the crisis, step up as witnesses, not copycats. They might still hate me, but they hate being puppets more. I leak my records just enough. Enough to tie Morrow directly to sketchy insider trades before any rumors even started. Showing shell corporations squeezing out tenants long before public announcements. Forcing regulators, powerful rivals, and average everyday investors to stare at the exact same crime. Morrow hits back instantly, flooding every forum with coordinated lies to save her skin. My accounts are flagged. My allies completely vanish. Rumors spread that Calendar Prince rigged the entire market and is scapegoating corporations to escape. It actually works. Then my connections save me where memories cannot. A courier from Yui's clippings posts proof of forced evictions. Shop owners share threatening letters. A rival firm gladly exposes her abnormal trades. The startup platform stays online just long enough for the truth to go viral. My memories blur as our crash plan breaks down. I lose 3 future companies in a single breath, then an entire timeline, then a crash date. My mental cheat sheet of the future rips like wet paper. I almost collapse in the stairs as sirens scream. Not fire alarms, actual financial alarms, the invisible warning rich people hear when control slips away. Kuroda corners me before the elevator, her perfect composure finally showing sharp edges. She tells me I have absolutely no idea what I just ruined. I tell her that is exactly the point. The market opens in absolute chaos the next morning, but not the kind Mara wanted. Her illegal positions were exposed too early, and her rescue plan collapses. Rivals attack her. Regulators launch probes. Forums that mocked me are suddenly flooded with screenshots, riddled with absolute fear and awe. Calendar Prince has struck again. But now, nobody knows if I predicted the future or shattered it forever. Yui finds me outside our place after the dust settles. I am just sitting on the cold steps because my legs are completely shaking. She does not hug me. Yui was never that simple. Instead, she sits beside me and asks what I lost. I try to recall the first name that faded away. Nothing came back. Another future memory just drifted away, completely gone from my mind forever. I admitted to her that I had lost the easy path. Yui stared at the morning sky, whispering that maybe easy roads were how I got lost the first time. Those words should have cut deep, but instead, they let me finally breathe again. The Morrow Capital crash did not happen like they wanted, but people still suffered. The markets do not stop bleeding just because one person chooses better, but the worst-case timeline was shattered. The hidden mechanism was exposed, shifting the timeline somewhere I had never seen before. For the first time since my rebirth, this giant unknown did not feel like failure. It felt like a future that had not been stolen yet, even if everyone misunderstood my moves. Honestly, that was almost comforting. The forums labeled me everything: a whistleblower, a manipulator, a hero, a fraud, a genius, and a curse. Some claimed the Calendar Prince saved the entire market from a massive, hidden crash. Others insisted I caused the panic, only switching sides when a better trade came along. Nobody knew the truth. That was much safer. Morrow Capital did not vanish. Corrupt giant companies like that do not disappear just because one plan fails. They rebrand, apply heavy pressure, sacrifice divisions, and bury coins in much deeper pockets. Hiroto completely vanished from public view for several weeks. Then, one evening outside a station, I spotted a silver coin balanced on a vending machine. There was no note or threat, just a reminder she was still out there, but I no longer saw it as an invitation. Now, I just looked at it like the weather. Dangerous, real, but not divine. Back home, Ren's mother noticed my changes without really understanding them. She saw Yui and I talking differently now, not necessarily softer, but way more honestly. Yui still called me out whenever my voice grew too cold. She still asked who would get hurt before asking if my plan would actually work. She did not fully trust me yet, which mattered. Easy forgiveness would have just been a cheap fantasy. One night, she set some tea by my laptop, telling me I was more useful now that I was less certain. That was honestly the most kind-hearted insult anyone had ever thrown my way. My parents from my first life remained a painful wound I could never close. I spotted them once across a shopping street, my mother carrying heavy groceries in both hands. My father walked half a step behind her, pretending not to watch whether the bags were too heavy. He looked much younger than the father I remembered, less tired, still carrying worries I had never bothered to understand back then. They passed within 10 paces of me. No recognition, no pause. And why would they? To them, I was just a stranger. I wanted to tell them I was sorry. But instead, I adjusted the community fund again that night, making sure their neighborhood would survive the next wave better than before. It was not nearly enough, but it was a start. My future memories remained damaged. Some patterns stayed razor sharp, while others had massive holes. A few contradicted each other so badly that I stopped writing them down as facts and marked them as possibilities. That made me weaker in one way, but I had gained things Haruto never had. Real people who questioned my actions before I could become cruel. A reputation heavy enough to open doors and dangerous enough to keep me careful, with methods built on real verification. I finally had a reason to protect absolute strangers who would never even know my name. The Calendar Prince nickname did not fade away, it changed. Before, it simply meant a lucky oracle. Now, it meant someone who arrived early enough to matter, and someone unstable enough to truly fear. I did not really love my name anymore, but I carried it. That was my new reality. Not some grand victory, just heavy responsibility under the spotlight. The final message arrived on a quiet morning. Somehow, that felt right. The very first panel had shown up over empty beers and a ruined life. This new one showed up while Yui complained I was burning toast by reading 3 files at once. A strange blue-white light suddenly cracked open near the kitchen window. It was not flashy or dramatic, but it completely stopped our breathing. A system alert. Unstable timeline deviation rate. Unregistered returner movement detected. Yui could not actually read it. I could tell from her face she saw something, but not the same warning. Something is wrong here. The system is actually leaking or shifting. Somewhere out there, another person had just shattered the timeline. Another regret-filled life. Another buyer. Another cheap experiment. Maybe someone just like me. Or maybe a person who took Moro's deal. Someone way worse than us. For a split second, that old instinct flared up: make the first move, win first. Then Yui snatched the burnt toast from my hand and softly called my name Ren. Not Haruto, not the Calendar Prince, just Ren. The name finally felt like mine. I watched the panel slowly fade away, and for once, I did not want it to reveal everything. My very first life ended because I spent it waiting for a safe tomorrow. My second life only started because I believed knowing the future was my salvation. Now the future was broken, open and completely alive. I had money, but cash was no longer the point. I had influence, but that was no cure. I possessed countless memories, but they did not control me anymore. Out of sight. The timeline market was shifting. Moro was still lurking in the dark. And get this, other returners are now stepping onto completely unpredictable paths. The world I barely saved from total ruin had turned into a battlefield where history itself was bought and stolen. But I was no longer that pathetic guy eating cold noodles in the dark. I was no longer the boy pretending luck was enough. I had burned the easy path. What lay ahead was way tougher. A sister who challenged me, parents I could only shield from afar, a public title I had to carry with care, and a future no one owned. And this time, as the terrifying unknown cracked open before me, I kept my eyes wide. I chose to step forward fully awake,